I think when we look at people, it's easy to see them and see their life and be like, wow, look at all these successes he's had, and look how he's this great trajectory he's on, or she. But then as a person, you feel that insecurity, or you feel like, man, I'm not good enough, or I wish I could do better, or all this striving and this, I don't know, there's different feelings in there that I don't quite understand. And so how does that feel to you? Do you think you've been successful all this time, or is it still something out in the future that you're trying to get to?
First off, I think I need to caveat this. I am just like incredibly blessed, right? Like blessings from God 24/7 in my life.
Yeah.
Right. So kind of in the success vein though, I do not think I am super successful in terms of where I want to be. But I think I have achieved a lot of mile markers that make me successful, right? So I have ambitions and goals and things that are down the line, but compared to 15-year-old Chris, I'm incredibly more successful than I thought I could ever be. One of the things that makes me really insecure about this, right, is the college degree, right, and my ability to output work. So I don't know if you know this, we've never talked about this. I didn't go to 3 years of high school because I was like in a hospital bed dying.
Wow.
Right? They're like, you're going to be dead when you're 18. You're going to be dead when you're 21. You're going to be dead when you're 25. So I've always been hyper insecure about my academic accomplishments because of, I feel like this is a big limiting factor.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't have a really solid high school education. I don't have any college education. I went for a little bit, but
yeah.
So it's something that's always been kind of over my head. And so I think this dovetails perfectly into your conversation, right? I think, have you ever read The Art of Not Giving Enough?
No.
Probably one of the best 5 books I've ever read in my life, right? And so it talks about at the start, you have values and metrics, right? And so everyone has the same values. I want to be successful. I want to be rich. I want to be a good dad. I want to be XYZ, right? But the metrics part is what changes from person to person. So what makes you successful? Well, it depends on the metrics you're using to gauge it, right? So if the metric you're using to determine success is if I'm a billionaire and I have 20 cars, you're never going to achieve it, right? But if the metric to determine successfulness is I'm working a full-time job, I'm providing for my family, and I'm in like a committed relationship of some sort, right? That I can hit those marks. So I feel like a lot of what has made me successful is I've changed my metrics to be easily attainable and kind of more short-sighted. And I really understand how to set metrics that I can go and achieve, right? So I don't have knowledge from a traditional institution, but I'll read books and I'll take Udemy classes and I'll do all of these things that I can look back and say, this is a metric that takes me to this value.
Yeah.
Right. And this is kind of what market research has really helped me understand is the person's metric is completely personal and always changes. It can change by where they grew up, what they do for a living, what they currently prioritize in life, but the value is always the same, right? So you have to understand the value, understand the metric, and create a clear path through. So a long-winded response, but I think I might have hit something important in there.
Yeah, that was great. Super interesting stuff. I'll definitely check that book out. The one thing I wanted to poke on there is like how you chose those easier metrics. You know, like that's not an easy thing to do either. And then how do you like commit to them and say, I'm going to, take this on to my core value. I will be satisfied if I X.
Yeah. And so the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, right?
And Chris, by the way, pausing before you, if you want to think for a moment there, I think you're one of the most, the smartest and, most interesting people I know. All those downsides you can think of in your past, like, I don't see that in you. I bet you after all that stuff. And I think you're a great guy.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. So the question kind of came back to, how do you change your short-term metrics? The first thing in my mind is understanding what metrics you inherently have. I attribute a lot of my soft skills to my mother and my grandmother. My grandma's father, right? I guess my great-grandpa, absolutely abusive alcoholic. So my grandma got really good at reading emotions to know if, hey, can I talk to him? Hey, do I need to steer clear? Hey, how do I interact in this scenario? My mom picked it up and I kind of picked it up from her. So just from this interaction that my great-grandpa had with my grandma, there's a lot of metrics that I personally have that I may not even realize. I view being successful or happy as when people around me are content and there's no underlying issues. And so that's something that I picked up generationally speaking. There's one of my favorite stories is about a mom and her kids are like, hey, why do you cut the ends off of the Christmas ham? You just cut the both butts off and you throw it away. And she was like, well, that's just how you make ham. And they were like, no, it's really not. Right. So she called her mom and she was like, Mom, why do I do this? And she was like, well, that's what I've always done.
Yeah.
I learned it for me. And she's like, well, I'll call my mom. So she calls her mom and she's like, hey, why do we cut the butts off our hams? And she was like, well, when we were first growing up, we were really poor and I didn't have a sheet pan big enough. So I would have to cut it so it would fit. Right. And so you have to understand that there are metrics and values that you have obtained that you may have no idea where they came from. So I think a large portion to being able to change them is to being able to objectively step off the emotional roller coaster and kind of analyze a little bit.
Did you have a hard process you went through of like writing down what your current metrics were and thinking about that a bunch? Or is this more of like looking back on it, there's a gestalt of, oh yeah, I did this thing and I thought about it hard and changed?
I think a lot of it was hoisted upon me or thrown upon me.
Yeah.
Because the metrics that I wanted to succeed in were not possible. Like I physically couldn't stand up.
Man.
So like the metric being good at sports or doing these things in high school was not conducive to long-term happiness.
Yeah.
Right. So like my freshman year of high school, I get on varsity wrestling. I love it. I'm a stud. Right. My sophomore year, I'm like, hey, I want to go back out for wrestling. But I've realized after I work out, I throw up and can't see straight.
Jeez. How did you get through all that? How does it affect you now?
We'll jump into that. But I think because I was limited health-wise, I had to understand you can still be successful without hitting the metrics that other people are using to obtain the core value. And I think it was a lot of it because I was so sick, I couldn't even achieve the metrics if I tried.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I couldn't even achieve.
It was obvious to you. It was forced upon you.
Yeah.
You're just like, if I can survive here, if I can make it back to school, then it's a good day.
Forced was the word. Right? And so my genetic disease. Yeah. My little sister also has it. And going through the same thing, right? Like 22, going to take her ACTs because she would like to get into a college, but it's frustrating because from society's perspective, she should have been done with her ACTs at 16. Yeah. Right? Her friends are graduating college and she's trying to get in. Yeah. Right? So I think a lot of it was forced. Yeah, that's going to be super difficult mentally and just, spiritually or however you want to talk about it, just to get through for your sister as well. So underlying core of what it is, I've got a myriad of different diseases and on their own, they're not that bad. But together, they cause some issues. Growing up, neurologists would always ask to write books on me because of how crazy my circumstances were.
Wow.
I always said no, because I don't like historically talking about my sickness. I always felt it was limiting, right? So this is the thing that's causing me to fail these metrics.
Yeah, don't look at me.
A lot
almost.
tied up in it.
Yeah.
So kind of the core of it is I have something called Ehlers-Danlos, which in the simplest terms is like my connective tissue doesn't work like it should.
Mm-hmm.
So like I can just stretch all the skin off my face, right? Like connective tissue is not functioning correctly, and that causes some other issues. But the biggest one was I hit puberty, and I'm pretty tall. I'm 6'3", 6'4", right? And I went from short and pudgy to really tall and lanky. And during that exponential growth, the myelin sheath, so like the fat that carries electrical transmissions, kind of got a little wonky, right? It didn't grow like it should, or who knows. So it created some issues. Wow, like the cyclic vomiting syndrome is what they describe it as. So I was throwing up 60 times a day.
Yeah, that's a weird symptom, right? I imagine like you said, trouble standing up, or the stumbling, or not, nerves not connecting up right. Makes some sense, but vomiting is odd.
Yeah, so it's your autonomic nervous system. So everything you do without thinking about it, right? So postural orthostatic tachycardia. So that was going flat to up. So what happens is you have a sympathetic and a parasympathetic system in your heart. When you stand up, you obviously need blood in places that it wasn't before.
Yep.
So your heart rate kicks up. And then you have a system, the parasympathetic system, I believe, in your heart that says, hey, blood's actively distributed. We can calm it down for a bit, right? And then you go back to your standing heart rate. Mine didn't work. So I would stand up, and a couple minutes later, my heart rate would be at like 220. And the way your body self-regulates that is just to faint you.
Yeah.
So you go back to flat, and there's no stress on your heart.
Jeez.
And blood circulates how it's supposed to.
Wow. Our bodies are like so incredibly complex, right? Like that. Yeah. It's incredible they work at all. Both from like the molecular level to this like larger systematic level, that the tiniest little thing being wrong can lead to this cascade of
stuff.